One quick final point on the media, something very close to my heart. We're coming into the U.S., and it has, for lack of a better phrase, upset some people. What is it about sources of information, about language, that makes people think that they have to try to control it?
They don't like what it says. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, why doesn't anyone report the fact that there's a very straightforward way to deal with what's alleged to be the gravest threat to peace in the world? Well, they don't want to hear that. And that's pretty normal. In the case of Al Jazeera, there's something else as well. There's a background of anti-Muslim racism, which is quite deep, and that's part of it. And it is deep. Actually, one of the funniest press conferences I've ever read about, it was partially recorded, was a couple of years ago under the Bush administration. The Emir of Qatar came to Washington, and Colin Powell, who was Secretary of State, tried to urge him to call off Al Jazeera. He didn't like the things they were reporting. And the Emir, I suppose, with a sense of humor or something, gave a press conference in which he sort of gave a mocking speech in which he informed the press about this thing called freedom of the press and how he wasn't going to interfere and so on and so forth. Barely reported, but must have been pretty funny. I wish I'd been there. But there's a double, and it's true that Al Jazeera, you could read about, say, the bombing of Lebanon, you could see the bombing of Lebanon, the bombing of Gaza, things happening in Iraq on Al Jazeera, which you couldn't see here. Literally couldn't see them. Because I think at the time, Al Jazeera had two small cable stations that were running it. One of them in Michigan, where there's a big Arab population, and one somewhere up in northern New Hampshire or something. But basically, you couldn't see it, unless you went to the internet, and nobody knows to do that. And now they picked up a cable station, and as you say, there's protests, small cable outlet, because you got to control information. And that's been understood for a long time. In fact, it's quite striking that there are industries devoted to controlling attitudes and opinions, very specific, explicitly. It's called the public relations industry. You take a look at its founding, its documents, and so on. The goal is control attitudes and opinion. And it's quite striking that the industry developed in the freest countries in the world. It developed in England and the United States about a century ago. And they were the countries that, plenty of restrictions, but they were the most free countries. And the business world and the conservative elements understood very well that it's getting harder to control people by force. The British Conservative Party, it's hard to control people by force. They're getting too many rights. Parliamentary labor parties, women getting the right to vote, and so on. So we got to move on to controlling attitudes and opinions. That's the next way to control people. And so these huge industries developed, which are dedicated to that. And it's exactly what they do. And furthermore, in a sense, everyone knows it, but nobody sees it. So suppose you turn on a television set. There's advertising. That's the main task of the PR industry, commercial advertising. If you ever took a course in economics, you were taught that markets are based on informed consumers making rational choices. Okay, turn on a television set and look at an ad. Are they trying to create informed consumers who will make rational choices? Like if you see somebody driving a new car off into space, with a football player and a sexy actress, is that trying to create an informed consumer making a rational choice?
It feels emotional.
Well, the whole thing is to try to create uninformed consumers making irrational choices. Now, going back to responsibility of intellectuals, they ought to be pointing out that this huge industry is largely devoted to undermining markets. Well, suppose you turn to elections. which they now run. The PR industry basically runs the elections. Are they trying to, you look at television ads, are they trying to create informed voters who will make a rational choice? No, quite the opposite. They want to undermine democracy by creating uninformed voters who will make irrational choices. So we have this huge industry spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year dedicated to undermining markets and democracy, and nobody says it. I mean, it's transparent, you know. It's not profound. I can explain it to my 10-year-old grandchildren, but try to find somebody who says it. No, it's just too deeply ingrained. We have to keep the mass of the population uninformed, marginalized, so that we, you know, the responsible men, can run things. And this is very explicit across the board. Progressive intellectuals, others. I mean, it's understandable. We are the elites, and we should be in control. And the rabble out there are stupid and ignorant, and for their own benefit, we've got to delude and control them.
Yeah.
It's like you don't let a 3-year-old run into the street. You know, that's the way we have to treat the population. It's all very explicit, and it takes a kind of genius not to see it. You know.
I know that you are extremely busy. You've said to others, I spend so much time on my work, I don't have time to go to the movies or go out to dinner. I feel bad that I took up your time. We should have just gone out to dinner. So, Noam Chomsky, thank you so much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Good to talk to you.
Thank you.